How exactly did a gritty, underground New York skate shop build a multi-billion-dollar empire out of thin air? Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the architecture of artificial scarcity. We're going to look at how a brand named Supreme literally mastered the psychology of hype to sell, well, essentially nothing. I mean, think about the absolute absurdity of this for a second. Why on earth would thousands of completely rational people wait in line outside for hours just to buy a literal clay construction brick with a red logo on it? But, in 2016, this actually happened. We aren't talking about high-tech jewelry or a rare vintage car here, just a heavy red clay brick. So get this, that simple $30 brick saw a staggering 3,000% markup. Literally within days, it was selling for over $1,000 on eBay. $1,000! It completely defies the basic laws of economics, right? So how do you trick the world into believing a plain piece of construction material is suddenly a highly prized asset? Part 1. Cultivating the Clubhouse, 1994 Lafayette Street. Okay, let's go back to 1994. Founder James Jebbia opens this tiny shop, and he leaves the center completely empty so kids could literally skate right in off the street. But this wasn't just a store, it was a clubhouse with a very specific, kind of intimidating attitude. The employees were notoriously rude, and that exclusive vibe, it brilliantly leveraged scarcity psychology. They tapped directly into our deeply ingrained human desire for things we're told we simply can't have. Like, if you weren't considered cool enough, the staff wouldn't even talk to you. On paper, that sounds like a terrible business plan, but actually, it was an absolute stroke of genius. And the staggering irony of their whole aesthetic is that their iconic red box logo was actually inspired by Barbara Kruger's anti-consumerist art. Anti-consumerist! Yet it somehow became the ultimate insider badge for what would eventually become a billion-dollar corporate brand. Wearing that logo basically meant you were part of the exclusive nothing that everyone else was completely left out of. Part 2. The art of the drop. Manufacturing scarcity. So how exactly did they weaponize this exclusivity on a global scale? Well, they did it through the drop. Think about it. While literally every other brand out there tries to sell as much inventory as humanly possible, Supreme does the exact opposite. They release a tiny handful of items, very specifically on Thursdays at 11 a.m. You can't think about your purchase. You definitely can't wait for a sale next week. If you don't hit buy in the first 10 seconds, poof, it's gone forever. Their secret sauce here is intentional underproduction. It's like, if they know for an absolute fact that 1,000 people want a specific t-shirt, they'll deliberately only make 600 of them. That's it. They purposefully generate this massive unmet demand, and by doing that, they transform the standard, boring act of shopping into a really high-stakes, highly competitive game. And this manufactured scarcity, it completely transformed their customer base. You see those professional resellers standing in 3-block-long lines? Yeah, they essentially became Supreme's marketing department. Every single person waiting outside was a living, breathing advertisement for the brand's immense value. They weren't just buying clothes anymore, they were acquiring an asset that literally appreciated in value the exact second they walked out the door. Part 3. Peak hype, when nothing becomes everything. It's genuinely fascinating to trace this evolution. I mean, they grew from a local underground clubhouse in '94 to commanding these massive professional reseller lines in the mid-2000s, right up until they finally forced the old guard of high fashion to just surrender. That 2017 Louis Vuitton collaboration, where they stamped that rebellious red logo on a $1,000 Italian leather trunk, that was the absolute ultimate industry validation. But of course, they didn't just stop at luxury clothing. They started unpredictably slapping their logo on absolutely everything. We're talking Oreo cookies, Honda dirt bikes, Zippo lighters, and even standard New York City subway Metro cards. No joke, people were literally jumping turnstiles and fighting each other just to grab a piece of branded plastic. Honestly, when you can sell cookies for 50 times their retail value, you aren't selling food anymore. You're selling pure perception. Part 4. The corporate exit. Selling cool. Now, this brings us to a massive reality check. What exactly happens when the ultimate anti-corporate brand finally cashes in? Well, in 2020, Supreme was acquired by VF Corp. That's the massive conglomerate behind totally mainstream staples like Vans and the North Face. And they bought it for an absolutely staggering $2.1 billion. Let that sink in. $2.1 billion. That is a monumental figure for a brand that literally started with empty floor space and rude employees. But this raises a really critical, literal billion-dollar question. What happens when the nothing becomes a little too available? Think about it. How can a giant parent company satisfy this endless demand for quarterly shareholder growth when your entire cultural cachet relies completely on artificial scarcity? And the reality of this corporate shift is pretty stark. During peak hype, as we talked about, you had $1,000 brick resales. But today, we're actually seeing dipping prices on resale platforms like StockX. As the brand opens up new stores globally to fuel all that corporate growth, the magic is kind of fading. Those bricks, they aren't fetching $1,000 anymore, mostly because the items are simply easier to get. It begs the question, when everyone has the exclusive logo, does the logo still mean anything at all? Part 5. The mirror of value. Ultimately, it really all comes down to this one idea. Value isn't about materials and it isn't about labor. Value is whatever we all agree it is. Supreme didn't just sell you a cotton shirt or a piece of clay, right? They sold the incredibly elusive feeling of belonging. They proved unequivocally that you can build an entire empire simply through mystery, strict control, and the architecture of hype. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Now that you know exactly how the machinery of hype works behind the scenes, would you still pay $1,000 for a brick just to prove you're an insider? Or is the hype machine finally starting to run out of steam? It's a fascinating question, and one that really challenges the very core of why we buy what we buy.